Okay, so I just recently fixed this 42-inch Panasonic plasma, which complements my 46-inch behind it. This was picked up from Manchester. But being the ever tweaker I am, it's quite an old plasma panel. It's full HD, but it has a fairly high black level. You can probably see there, the black glows quite a lot. It might be hard to see on the camera, but you'll have to trust me. So I've actually got two panels. This 42PZ80 from Panasonic and 46PZ80. So they're the same plasma panel, it's just different size. And I've checked the black level is basically the same between these two panels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be tweaking the black level on this to get as low as possible, because there's quite a few adjustments on these you can make to tweak the panel and get an improved contrast ratio, which makes darker scenes like this look more realistic. So if we talk about the theory of a plasma panel, it is a gas discharge panel. It's basically a large gas discharge tube with many pixels, in this case 1920 by 1080, with each pixel in the horizontal axis being broken into 3 subpixels, a red, green and blue. You may be able to see closely, but anyway. And so you've got a red pixel, green pixel, blue pixels for 5,760 cells that way, 1,080 that way. And to make a cell light up, essentially the address driver at the bottom of the panel selects the line by making it high. The scan driver selects the other side. The cell is then programmed, and this is done for all the lines in the screen. And this is done 480 times a second on these panels. And then once the image is made to appear, once the image is programmed in, the panel is sustained by applying the alternating sustained voltage. But in order to get the panel to sustain properly, you need to get the free electrons in the plasma gas, which is a neon, xenon, argon mix of some kind, and you need to get the free electrons liberated. Bit of physics, I don't fully understand how it works, but you need to do what's called priming. And what priming does is it applies a ramp waveform to the panel, which makes the gas discharge ever so slightly, and that produces that black level. And the goal essentially in this type of tweak is to get that black level as low as possible, whilst ensuring that the priming happens enough such that the panel sustains properly. And what will happen if the priming is insufficient is you get dead pixels generally, flickering dark pixels in brighter scenes, or you'll get what's called maldischarge, which is flickering bright pixels in darker scenes. Sometimes you'll get trails following motion. In some cases the panel will appear dimmer on bright scenes. So there's a lot of tweaks that need to be made to improve it. Now what Panasonic did is basically they made it so it would definitely work and it would never maldischarge essentially. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it right near the limits, just at the point where it's about to maldischarge. So just a little above it, so we get the darkest black level this panel is capable of producing, which might be twice or 3 times as deep as it currently is, which obviously doubles or triples the contrast ratio, which greatly makes the picture improve. It makes it pop a lot more. So this video is going to basically be a demonstration of how to do that. And movies like Back to the Future are great and all, however it's kind of hard to test the panel on them because the pattern's changing so often. So you go into the service menu to adjust to get a test pattern up. So to do this, hold the channel down, volume down button on the TV and then press the 0 3 times on the remote. Give it a few seconds, it will take some time. Then press red twice and you can get different test patterns to appear on display. And the one we'll really be using a lot is this one. It's a center white with the edges being black. You've got other patterns like that. That could be useful as well, a single smaller white block. And so what we want to make sure is the black is deep and the white is also visible and it's not maldischarging. Now on the camera, things like these patterns will appear to look odd. It's just an effect of the camera. They look absolutely perfect to me. Due to how the panel is sustained, it's composed of multiple brightness levels, which are sent one after another. Because of that, the camera can sometimes pick up the wrong brightness level, and it creates a weird pattern on the video. So ignore that if you see that on the test videos. And then once you're out of this mode, just press the return or the exit button and give it a few seconds. It will reset back to the original picture settings. So what I'm doing right now is I'm playing a video on the display, got the cover off, and I'm probing the sustain output. Now I've done, because I can change the frame rate on my computer, I've set it to 50 Hz. I set the scope to trigger on line trigger, and my oscilloscope here is triggering once every 50 seconds because I live in the UK and we have 50 Hz mains here. It's not exactly precise, but you can see it's a very good trigger, and it's much easier than trying to set up a ramp trigger or anything on some of the sustain outputs. Interestingly, here you'll see how this plasma panel attempts to save a little bit of energy. You can see as the film brightness varies, that field, that subfield there, is dropped in some instances, and when it's necessary it appears. Unfortunately, these things still do eat up a lot of power, but that's the price you pay for a plasma display. So what I'm going to do, by the way, the test point I probed is the negative lead of this little electrolytic here. C7, well, anyway, it's down there. You should be able to find it, and that connects to the buffer outputs, and it's more convenient than actually probing those screws because, well, those screws there are high voltage, and the probe might slip off them and fall onto somewhere else and shorten out and go bang, which would not be good because I have to repair a lot more. And since it's what's just a cold joint somewhere on the power board, well, it's been a nice easy fix so far. So anyway, I'm going to talk about how to adjust it. We'll use the service manual to help that. So I dropped the VE, and I've dropped it from 156 to about 136, and the panel is still sustaining absolutely properly, and there's no problem. So what I've done here is I've set my scope up as a glorified voltmeter and measuring the VAD voltage on this panel. This is the same as VY on, and I think VSC on LG and Samsung. But basically, it's a voltmeter. It's not a scope anymore, and I'm measuring minus 130 now. It was minus 140. I've dropped it to minus 130, and it's even darker now. You can't see on this camera, unfortunately, but it's at least a quarter the brightness of that panel there. So this is actually looking quite tweakable, these ones, which is unexpected. And I still haven't been able to hit a minimum discharge point. I haven't hit a point where I'm getting maldischarge. There is no sign whatsoever of maldischarge on this panel. So Panasonic really gave these a very wide margin, that's for sure. So the VAD voltage adjustment is down there. Perhaps hard to capture this on the camera, but you can see there's a kind of cyany mist discharge on this test pattern, which is white, red, which is a red, green, blue alternating pattern, which appears as white. I don't know if you can see it, basically the middle of the panel is kind of cyan in colour, so I'm going to have to increase the voltages slightly to get rid of that. So what I did is I upped VSUS on this panel from the stock 205 to about 209 volts. Again, using my scope as a voltmeter, which is a little inaccurate but good enough for the purposes of this. And the cyan discharge is still very slightly there, but it's almost completely gone. So I'm going to just up VAD a little to get rid of that mist discharge there in the panel, and I think I'm going to leave it at that because that appears to be the minimum tweaking position for this panel.